With the help of Hashem, we are learning Moed Katan Daf Koyach Daf Chav Ches. This is going to be the second to last daf in the Masechta. We left off on Daf Chav Zayin, Amid Beis, 8 lines down from the wide lines. In middle of the line, Amar Ula. Ula is going to speak, beginning with Hesped al Halev, which means that whenever you find in scripture the word hesped, it doesn't only mean someone giving a eulogy, but it also means that someone was beating on their chest. We're going to learn the concept that it's important not to overly mourn, as will be defined. The Gemara is going to clarify that when the Mishnah says that the women's beer are never set down on the street prior to burial, is not so simple. The Mishnah is actually referring to a very narrow case, but in other cases one could, to give kaveh to the nefteres, put the beer down. We're going to learn a lot about misas neshikin, a death by the kiss of God. We're going to learn about the concept of kares that could express itself by a person passing away either relatively young or by passing away very quickly. We'll see when passing away quickly is some sort of kares, or when passing away quickly can be even a blessing for the person who passes away, all depending on one's age. We're going to learn that chaye, this is the Seder of the Gemara, and Banei and Mezoina, lav b'schus Talia milsa, ela b'mazol Talia milsa. We're going to have unbelievable stories of great Amoraim that conversed with the Malach HaMavis prior to passing away, particularly not wanting to have a painful death. We're going to have the Chazal that Ashrei Mi Shabala Kan v'Talmudei B'Yadei, and much more. Let's start Chevra on Daf Chav Zayin Amid Beis, 8 lines down from the wide lines. In middle of the line, Amar Ula. Says the Gemara, Amar Ula, Hesped al Alev. Again, that when you have in scripture the word Hesped, which literally means a eulogy, it also means that the one eulogizing was beating on their chest, as it says, Al Shodayim Soiftim, that on the chest does one give a Hesped. Whenever you find in Tanakh the words tipuach also in reference to giving a eulogy, tipuach means that aside of just giving the words, by yad there was the clapping of the hands. And kilos, the word kilos means stomping on the ground, beregel, with one's foot. In other words, there was a certain background noise that was made during a eulogy. And indeed, Tana Rabbanim, we learned in a Braisa that Hamekales, if someone is banging or stomping with their feet on the ground during a eulogy, Lo Yekales b'sandal, they should not do so if they are wearing only a sandal. Ela b'minol, only if they are properly wearing shoes, because there is a sakana. Sandal is not fixed on a foot as well as a shoe, and if while you're stomping on the ground the sandal will fall off, a person can really hurt their foot. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Avel, Kiven sheni'ina roishay, once the Avel shakes his head, Shuvei menachem rashayim leishav etzloi, the people that are coming to console should no longer be sitting with him or with her, which means as follows, that just like an Avel may not engage in she'ilah shalom, I know it means specifically to use the word shalom, but really he cannot properly greet someone. So it also goes without saying he cannot properly say goodbye to someone. So when you have someone visiting you and you had enough, and you tell them, okay, Yashikoyach, thank you for coming, goodbye, this is not something an Avel can do. But what should an Avel do? People come, nudnikim, they stand on him, they stand on her. So if they motion with their heads, the people that are there should understand that they had enough. And we have to have that good sense. On one hand, it's nothing more beautiful than the mitzvah of nichum avelim, and you really, the biggest nichum is simply by the fact that you showed up and you sat with them. But be sensitive to the fact that if you have avelim that are sitting and constantly receiving people, it's very draining and very difficult. And when you feel that they had enough, then you should pick yourself up and you should go out. V'amar Rabbi Yechanan, Hakol chayovim la'amoy b'pnei nasi. When the head of the Jewish community in the Holy Land, and similarly the same thing will be in Chutz La'aretz with the Reish Galusa, when they walk in, you have to stand up, chutz from an Avel who does not stand up, nor a person who's sick. For Amar Rabbi Yechanan, one based on the other, Lakoyel oimrim lahem shavu. When the Nasi walks into the room, people to give him kavod stand up. So then he is the one that has to tell them that they may sit down, prior to which they may not. Chutz ma'avel v'chayla. An avel, a mourner, or someone who's sick, that Bechlal did not have to stand up for the Nasi. Since they did not need to stand up, they don't need to get his permission if they opted to stand up, to go and to sit down. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Avel. Yoim Rishain, a mourner on the first day, either the first day after the burial or the first meal after the burial, Asur lechoy lecha mishaloi, may not eat food that came out of his pocket. And this is a detail of the Sudas Havra'am, which we practice nowadays. It's not just that people, as a nice gesture, want to offer and bring food to the house of the Avel. No, an Avel should not eat food that was bought out of his pocket. And where do we learn that from? Like we learned many other details from that which God told Yecheskel, foretelling that his wife, whom he loved, will pass away. And God told Yecheskel that regarding many mourning practices he may not engage in. From that we learned in the opposite, that if not for Yecheskel, if not for the exception, the rule is to do the opposite. That Yecheskel, that after he's going to be mourning for his wife, v'lechem anoshim loy soichel, which meant food that he brought on his own, is arayah. Food that he gets from others he may not eat, is arayah that normally you dafka have to eat lechem that came from other anoshim. Says the Gemara Rabba and Rabbi Yosef that they were obviously careful not to take gifts from others, so they made the following deal with themselves, that each one knew that it's a cycle of life, that sooner or later people are going to have to sit Shiva. So whenever one was in mourning, the other one brought them the Sudas Havra. So it's not that they got it from Stam, a stranger. And to a certain degree, maybe they felt that even though they did not buy it out of their pocket, but they knew that they're going to give back that meal to their fellow when they're going to be, God forbid, sitting Shiva. If someone passes away in a city, everyone in that city, no one is allowed to engage in their business. This is wow. In other words, obviously the main obligation of being occupied with all of the arrangements of the burial is on the Avelim, but it doesn't end with the Avelim. And when you tell the whole city no one can go to work, let's make sure that all of the burial needs are being tended to. Well, if people can't work, then they'll make sure that all of the burial needs will be tended to sooner or later. Now, this is a very big statement. This is not something that we find nowadays, as the Gemara will relate the story. That Rav Hamnuna once went Ikla Lidaru Masa. He went to this place called Daru Masa. And Shama Koil Shipura, the Shachva. The minig there was that if someone passed away, they blew the shofar. So he heard that shofar sounding, he understood that someone passed away, and yet, Chaza Hanach Inche the Ka'avi Avidata. Not everyone, but some people were going about their regular business. So Amar Lahu, so he told them that, you know what, Lehevu Hanach Inche B'Shamta. Oy Gewalt. All of these people that did not stop their work to find out more details, to see if they can be helpful, they should be put in a ban. As we learned previously in Moed Katan, the dinam of Hashamta, whether it's Nidui, whether it's Chedem. And he says, what, Lo Shachva Inish B'Masa, did you not hear the soundings of the shofar? Is it not that someone passed away? To which they responded, Amrulei, hold on. Chavurasa Ika B'Masa. Says Rashi, Chavurasa means that there were different groups designated in the city. Every group was designated to be occupied in tending to the needs of the burial for their locale, for their little neighborhood. And being that the person who passed away is not part of our chevra, it's not our responsibility. It's not about our responsibility. Someone else is going to be busying themselves with it. And indeed, what we have now in every city is what we call chevra kadisha. Here you have the words chevra, Rashi is chavurasa. In other words, once you live in a city where there's a chevra kadisha, then this isur of asiyas malach and kol b'nei ha'ir is no longer relevant. Obviously, again, the mourners are the ones, the first obligation falls on the immediate relatives. But to help them out, so if you live in a city where there's no chevra kadisha, so then indeed, no one can do any work. Like this, you're making sure that everyone will do what they could to prepare all of the funeral arrangements. But once you have a chavorasa, in their case there was a chevra that everyone was part of for their region, for their little neighborhood, and the niftar or the nefteris was from another neighborhood, then indeed there was no prohibition for them to do malacha. And Amar Lahu, to which Rav Hamnuna responded, then the ban, you are released from the ban because he accepted this concept. Says the Gemara of Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Kol hamiskashe al meisoy yoiser midai. Whoever grieves excessively. Now I know this is a very broad term. How do you define grieving excessively? Well, first of all, we have the laws of Shiva, of Aninus, of Shiva, of Shloishim, of the year. So grieving excessively would be to continue, let's say, to sit Shiva beyond the time of Shiva. There is also a certain amount of emotional mourning that is very difficult to put a finger on, but I think people's chavedim can see to it. Not mourning is achzorius. Excessively mourning is an indication either that the person is not accepting the judgment of God, or that this person doesn't fully believe that there is an afterlife, which there is. So it says the Gemara, what happens? This is a very gevurah statement. Al meis achad hu boicha. Then this person is going to have someone else to cry over. God forbid. Al derech we find by the spies that God Almighty told our grandparents collectively that atem bechisem, right? Bechia shel chinam. You're crying for no reason. Well, if you want to cry, I'll give you a reason. Rachmana litzlan. And on the Batei Mikdashim were destroyed on Tisha B'av, beginning with this story. And here comes a story in the Gemara. Hayitza, there was a woman. Tahaviz b'shivavusei, that she lived in the neighborhood of the great Rav Huna. And Havula Shiva b'nei. She had 7 sons. And Achmana litzlan meis chad minay. One of her children passed away. Now you're speaking about grieving excessively. There's nothing that brings out grieving more than, God forbid, a parent burying a child. And Havas kabachya b'seirasa alei. So here it's not about her extending the laws of mourning, but here it's about the amount of crying that happened was considered excessive. So Shalach lo Rafuna sent for her, and he told her that loy savet, don't do that. But v'lo yashkechabei, she didn't pay attention to him. So Shalach lo, he sent for her again, and he says that eat saita, if you're going to listen to me, and you're going to, so to say, diminish your mourning, good. But if not, savis zavdasa leidach mis. You're going to have to prepare the tachrichin, or the provisions for another one of your children. And she didn't pay attention. And this went on many times. So another child passed away, and another child passed away, until mis kulu, all of her children passed away. L'soif armala, at the end, he told her that, listen, if you're not going to stop mourning, timoish zavdasa lenafshech, prepare provisions for yourself. Indeed, and she did, and she ultimately passed away. It says in Yirmiyahu that al tifku lemeis, don't cry for the dead. Va'al tonudu loy, and don't shake your head. What does that mean? Of course, don't cry for the dead. Of course, we're supposed to cry. So that's the meaning. Al tifku lemeis, don't cry for those who passed on, meaning yoiser midai. Va'al tonudu loy, don't shake your head in grief more than the shir. And now, so what's the shir? So haketzat. So the first 3 days are lebchi. The final 4 days of the shiva, which means now during the entire shiva, you're going to have hesped. And stam lahoyer, that even, let's say, minik Chabad is not to give a hesped during the burial. It doesn't mean we don't give a spadim. It just means we don't give a spadim during the burial. But you give a spadim during the shiva. Shloishim, for the first 30 days, we continue to externalize our grief. It's interesting how we're picking these two dinim, ligihuts, by not wearing freshly pressed clothing, all of the restrictions we learned above about laundering, nor ulit despitis, nor cutting the hair. But after the shloishim, we're not speaking about father and mother. Here we're speaking about, all the other 5 relatives. The mourning ends after shloishim. So Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is what God says. What you're showing grief, meaning you seem to imply that you have more rachmanis than me. No. You're not more rachamim than me. And this is particularly emes, also together with the fact that there is an olam haba, that it doesn't end. It's not final. The connection of the soul and the body is temporarily stops during the passing. But there's olam haba for right now for the neshama. Then there's going to be tchias hamesim. People that take into heart all of the ikri of our religion are going to have a much easier time and of so to say weaning themselves off this excessive grieving. When it says b'chu b'choy lahoylach, cry for those who go, Amar Rav Yehuda, that double crying, what is the tragedy? When is there a time to grieve even more than usual? If someone passes away without having any children on their own. And by the way, that also goes normally to parents grieving for the children if the children are young. Levi, he never would go visit a mourner's home. For whatever reason, he was learning Torah, but there was one type of Avelos that even he went. If someone passed away and left no children, that was considered the greatest tragedy. And the Chsiv, as it says, that that's the pasuk, cry for those who go because they're not returning. And he will no longer see es eretz moiladatoy. So understands Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that's referring to someone who did not leave children, who gives children, they perpetuate the person's connection to this world. Go cry, and he himself would go to visit a house of an aval if someone did not leave any children. That's the way he understood this pasuk. Rav Huna Amar, what does this pasuk refer to? Whereas there are certain circumstances where you got to cry more than others. That's for a person. The double expression is being benamis. If someone sinned and they repeated the sin, which means, as we'll see, that it became light for them, they probably did not do tshuva for it, that's going to be the tragedy. And afuna l'taimi, the Amar afuna, kivin sha'avar adam aveda v'shana. But when a person makes a mistake, but they repeat it, once they repeat it, chutraloi, it becomes permissible to him. So the Gemara says, no, that's not what he meant. Chutraloi salka daitach, does it become permissible just because you repeat the sin? No. Ela ema, what he means, nasis loy keheter. The first time a person does something, so a person has a yetzer hara. But right afterwards, you at least you feel guilty. A healthy amount of guilt. It's an indication. It's like a nervous system. You step on your foot, it hurts. At least to make sure no one steps on your foot again. If it doesn't hurt anymore, you're in big trouble. So that's the b'chu b'chai lahaylach. Because if they didn't do tshuva, then it's a beta. Then that's something to cry for. Amar Rabbi Levi, Avel shloisha yomim arishayim. That whenever a family is experiencing a death, that means that not only is the person who passed away, was he given over to the dominion of the Malach HaMavis, but it means really that there's some sort of a shadow of the angel of death and of other calamities upon all of the family, upon all of the immediate relatives. So in Aval for the first 3 days, Yiras Atzmai Ki'ilu Cherev Munachas Loi Bein either Shtei Yirei Chaysav or Bein Shtei Kseifav. He should picture that as if there's a sword hanging in between his thighs or hanging in between his shoulders. In other words, there's danger lurking. From 3 days until the 7th day, the danger is slowly going away. So there is a sword, but it's not in between his thighs, but it's kenegdoi b'keren zavius. It's pointed towards him, but it's in the corner of the room. From the next phase of mourning is ki'ilu eiveres kenegdoi b'shuk. It's as if you're walking in the market. People who live in Brazil or people now maybe in Los Angeles and dangerous cities. When you walk out there, it's dangerous. Keep your eyes out. There are people that might be armed looking to harm you. Okay, and going back, the last line in the Amid is referring back to the Mishnah. Mishnah says that before burial, in some communities, not the way we do the ma'amadois today. Beyond that, they would put the one who passed away down on the street leading up to the burial, and there they would say eulogy, or there they would say a Psa Mishnah and say a Kaddish or say a Tehillim. They would put the person who's about to be buried down, and that would heighten the amount of mourning. So says the Mishnah, "V'lo yishol nashim la'olam." Women are never put down mipnei hakavod because of their honor. Right? It sounds like la'olam, right? It doesn't get clearer than that. Women are never put down. Says the Gemara, no, that's not what the Mishnah means. They said, the sages in the city of Nardoi explained that lo yishanu, the Mishnah is referring to never putting women down. Daf Chav Ches is elo chaya, a woman who passed away during childbirth, which was tragically relatively common in the times of Chazal, or really up until recently. In other words, like Rashi says, when a woman passes away during childbirth, so there's a lot of body fluids that continuously ooze out of her body, and it's considered disrespectful for her, for people to see that, and therefore you got to go straight to the burial. It's not about putting it down. It's not like when you're walking, the body doesn't ooze out. But if you put the person down and you leave them down even just for a few minutes, then when you pick them up and you walk further, everyone can see on the ground underneath where they were laying, they can see a puddle of blood. And it's not respectful. Avol sha'ar nashim, but all other women, like men, if you want to be machabed them, yes, manichin, you can put them down prior to burial. Rabbi Lazar Omer, Afilu sha'ar nashim, he disagrees with that. Even by other women, one should go straight to the burial, because as it says, Vatamas sham Miriam vatikover sham. What's this fatih? She passed away and she was buried there. That's to tell you, third line from the top, Samuch lemisa kavura, that by women do not delay. Okay. By Tzvika's mother in Yerushalayim and HaKodesh, that they followed the first opinion. Put her down, and they Tehillim and a Mishnah and a Kaddish, and they did that a few times. I mean, all of it is being done to give kavod to the nefteres, but here we see, there was a machlokes whether it should never be done for women, the way it's mashma from the Mishnah, or the Chevre Kadisha in Yerushalayim, they followed the Nahar Dois, that it's only for a chaya, in where you may not do it. No, okay. Says the Gemara, now that you quoted the passing of Miriam, Af Miriam bin Neshika Mesa. Not only, as we learned elsewhere, that Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Aharon and Moshe, that they passed away with what we call Misas Neshikin, which means that God, through kissing them, took their neshama out of their body. Miriam had that same type of death, and based on the same pasuk, Asya Sham mi Moshe. By Moshe it says Sham. Here it says Vatamas Sham, to teach you that they had the same type of death. Al pi Hashem, as it's written by Moshe. It doesn't sound that she's a woman to say that she died by Misas Neshikin. It's more modest, just to allude to it here through a sham. Now, this concept of Misas Neshikin is very significant on so many levels, but just to focus now on one of them, and we spoke about this many years ago, that there's this whole machloikas people should be aware of, whether the remains, whether the guf kadosh of a tzaddik gives off tuma or not. I'm speaking about this question is regarding whether a kohen can come in the close proximity of a kavod of a tzaddik. Now, in Talmud Bavli, there is no indication anywhere that the kavod of a tzaddik is not metame. There is a Tosfos that brings down from Yerushalmi, primarily that after Rabbi Akiva was brutally murdered by the Romans, and so Eliyahu Hanavi. And let's follow the shita that holds Eliyahu Navi as Pinchas. If Eliyahu Navi is indeed a kohen, he was misasek in the burial of Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara in Yerushalmi says that after Eliyahu Navi, with help of people that were living here normally, finished burying Rabbi Akiva, they asked Eliyahu Navi, "Well, are you not a kohen? How can you How can you busy yourself with the burial?" Now, truth be told, you could have argued that Rabbi Akiva was a meis mitzvah. By a meis mitzvah, there was no one else there, and people were afraid to bury him with honor because they didn't know what the Romans would do to those who buried Rabbi Akiva. So he had a category of a meis mitzvah, but that's not what he answered. He was the one that answered that kivrei tzadikim are not metami, and that's the source. Now, I just a lahoyer that when the Frierdiker Rebbe had his Hilula, So when the Rebbe, who was the one that instructed the building of what we call today the oil in Queens, the Rebbe asked that they should build a mechitza 10 tfachim or higher right around the periphery of the grave, that they should not put a covering in the oil of the Frierdiker Rebbe, unlike other oils that are made by our other Rabbeim that have a proper covering, because the Rebbe wanted that even people that follow the opinion that a kever of a tzaddik does halachically give off tuma, and therefore kohanim may not go there, for a kohen to be allowed to go there, there's ways of circumventing it. Because if when you build a mechitza around a kever, then even though normally a kohen may not come within daladamas, that's only if there's no wall. Halachically, a wall means 10 tfachim or higher. That's taka why right around now the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe, there's that wall. Also, there's no roof. Verstehst? Just to be aware that generally Hasidim and Sfardim, we follow the opinion that Kivrei Tzadikim don't give off Tumah. And Kohanim are going to go to the Kavarim of all the Tzadikim. But just to be aware that now it's connected to Misas Neshikin. Because the Pinigla, the tumah that comes into the person's body is not death per se. There's a certain something that the Malach HaMavos puts in the person through which it extracts the soul. And Al Pi Kabbalah, that is what gives off the tumah. And if someone merits to pass away, not through the Malach HaMavos, but God Himself, through kissing the tzaddik, removes the neshama, but there is no spiritual, let's say, poison or something that can contaminate beruchnias that goes into the body, they're not going to give off tumah. Interesting. The connection Tuma with Misas Neshikin. If there's Misas Neshikin, then there might not be Tuma. I wanted the picture that he's putting up. Okay, very good. That's just a picture. You see the wall that this was instructed by the Rebbe to build. By the Alter Rebbe and Hadich, not there is a wall, nor there is an open ceiling. Okay, weiter. Says the...
Are you saying that all tzaddikim pass away through this Misas Neshikin?
The great tzaddikim, correct. Perhaps.
It seems here that there was only 5.
Correct. But these are the archetypes, and anyways, this pastusha de Moshe b'chol dara v'dara, and that goes to the Shiva Sarayim, and here there's the Inyan of Miriam. Let's go weiter. Omar Rav Ami, Lama nismacha misas Miriam l'pashas paraduma, as they're both written in Chukas. Loi melach ma paradumas mechaperes af misasan shal tzadikim mechaperes. Amazing. Mechaperes means it cleans the slate. And as the Alter Rebbe quotes there in the famous Yigeres Chav Zayin, he quotes another statement from the Zohar that Tzadikaya maginin al alma b'misoson yatim mebechayoyin. Another concept that they protect the world when they pass away, or even after they passed away, even more than they protected during their lives. This is connected to this Chazal over here. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Lama nismacham misas aharon lebigdei kahuna. Also on Parshas Chukas, now the juxtaposition is that Moshe Rabbeinu instructed Aaron to remove this bigdei kahuna and to dress in front of him his son Elazar, who became the subsequent Kohen Gadol. But there is a juxtaposition discussing the begadim to the passing of Aaron to tell you ma bigdei kahuna mechaprin, and Tosfos reminds us from the Gemara in Zvachim that goes through every single of the begadim exactly for what it is mechaper. Af misasan shal tzadikim brings about mechaperes, brings about an atonement. And let's just connect one with the other. In other words, if God Almighty comes that close, so to say, to kiss the tzaddik, it's simply the closeness or the more revealed presence of godliness, which in itself arouses by every Jew. In their nish, we feel it. We feel the connection to God, and automatically when you feel the connection to God, if a person did things that should not have been done, there is a natural tshuva that happens by a yid, because the sin separates me from God, who I feel, who I want to be even more connected to. All of that happens by the Misa of a Tzaddik. Tana Rabbanan, the second wide line. And here we're going to a whole topic. Bekitzer, there's something called kares that we are familiar with. The Torah is filled with a punishment called kares for certain misbehaviors. And kares means many things. God forbid a person passing away b'loi banim. Kares also can express itself by a person passing away very young. And there is a concept of Kadis that expresses itself by a person not being given a certain amount of days to get ready to pass away, which is helpful. It's helpful in the context of a person doing proper tshuva prior to passing. It's helpful for the family also to get readied. So says the Braisa that if a person passes away pisoim, right away, that's called misa chatufa, a abrupt death. The word chatufa literally means snatched. It's as if he was snatched. Yoim echad v'meis, if a person had a whole one day and then they passed away, that's called misa dechufa, a hastened death. Rab Chananya ben Gamliel Omer, well, that's connected to a misas magefa. In this context, as we'll clarify in a moment more details. But if the person is relatively younger and they pass away very quick, that's some sort of indication of some sort of kadis. Or here we're having the word magefa. Shenemet, as it says, Ben Adam, hineni lekech mimcha. This is what God Almighty is telling Yecheskel regarding the passing of his wife. Es machmad einecha, the one who your eye, the beloved to your eyes, bimagefa. And it says that when did she pass away? Within a day of when God told Yecheskel. Izaraya that she got ill, but they were within one day. That's called a misas magefa. Shnei yamim v'meis, if a person is ill for 2 days, so they have a little bit more of a heads up, but then they pass away within 2 days. That's called misa duchuy, a hurried death. Gimel, if a person is ill for 3 days, then it's called a misas ge'ora. There's a rebuke. In other words, it's interpreted here. Again, it's not always, but now we're learning our Gemara as some sort of negative, as a negative. Arba'ah, then it's still not okay. It's called nizifa. It's a scorned. There was a certain scorning done by only allowing that person to be ill for 4 days. Chamisha, if a person is ill for 5 days or more, zoi hi misas kol adam. That's the way to go. Amar Rav Chanan Maikra, where do we find that ideal you should have a 5 day or more heads up? When it says regarding Moshe, Hein, behold, Karvu Yamechalamos, the days of your demise is coming near. Taiches the Gemara, the word Hein, as we know in Greek, means one. Karvu, which coming near, but it's written in the Belashon Rabim. The minimum of Rabim is 2. Yamecha, again, your days is also written in the plural, another 2. So 1 and 2, ha chamisha, and indeed, Hein, chad, because she came Belashon Yavani, Kaidin la'achas, with the word Hein. Moshe Rabbeinu was given a 5 days notice prior to passing. So that's called, what we learned until now is really going to be called Kadis Diyoime. Kadis that is expressing itself not in the age of one's passing, but in the speed of one's passing. Meis b'chamishim shana. If someone passed away when they were 50, that's your classical misas kades that expresses itself that if the person didn't do tshuva, so then the vulnerable years is from 50, we'll see, until 59, as we'll see in a moment. So misas kades. Chamishim ushtayim. Now really, again, it's from 50 until 59, which would include also 52. Happens to be, and that's a very important point, that just because we are having one understanding of why people pass away the way they do, it's not the entire picture. That's the mistake that many people make. They learn a chazal, and they have to know that divrei Torah aniyim b'makam echad v'ashirim b'makam achad. We're learning a little piece right now. So Shmuel Haramasi, the great Shmuel, passed away 52. And God forbid to think that Shmuel was shaykh to a concept of Kaddish. Of course not. So there are other reasons why people pass away younger. And by the way, there are other reasons when people pass away with no heads up. That's the Gemara here. Shmuel Haramasi passed away, Chamish Mushtayim. Ooh, that's the passing of Shmuel Haramasi. Okay, now, when a person passes away 60 or up, so here we have a big machloikis in Girsa'is. Here in the Gemara it says, Zui misa b'dei shamayim. And many people quote this, and at least it's geschmack to learn it, just to know that there's a machloikis in the Girsa here. So, enachanami, there is a lesser heavenly punishment known as misa b'dei shamayim, and many people having this version understand from 50 to 59, that's Kaddish. From 60, or maybe only 60, or maybe 60 and up, let's go just 60, that's taka, not Kaddish, but that's misa b'dei shamayim, which is considered a heavenly punishment on a lower level. There's so many other girsois here. So you have let me find it, Rabbeinu Hananel and others. I'm reading the Rabbeinu Hananel 2 lines under the Gemara. He says, Ben Shishim Zumisa Kol Adam. Zumisas Fakert. 60 is not Misa B'dei Shamayim. That a normal death is 60. Once a person reaches 60 years old and they pass away, that's in no way an indication that their life, so to say, was shortened because of any sort of misbehavior. God forbid, that's already normal. Amar Mar Zutra. And now the Hemshech, according to the Rabbeinu Hananel, fits that once a person is 60 or above and they passed away, it's like a normal death. Misas Kol Adam. How do I know that? Ma'ikra, because it says in Iyov that Tavoi Bekelach Elai Kaver. You will go to the grave in a mature age. The word kelach means mature, and big kelach has the numerical value of 60. Fakert, mature, means that it's normal. It's very difficult to explain the hemshech and the maikra according to our written version that 60 is not a good thing. Because this pasuk, if you read the context, is a good context. Says the Gemara, Shevim, if a person lived until 70, Seva, that's already old age. They lived until their old age. Shmoinim, if you lived until you're 80, that's Gevurais, then you're mighty, you have Koyach, Dichsiv, as it says, right? Yemei Shenoi Seinu Behem Shivim Shana, which is interesting because, again, according to the Rabbeinu Hananel and many other Rishonim, really Yemei Shenoi Seinu was Shishim. But we want to live until old. So a good long life is until 70. Then a Shmoinim Shana. Amar Abba. Mechamishim va'at shishim shana. Like we learned above. When we said 50, it doesn't mean dafka 50. It means from 50 until 59. That what? Zu hi misas kodes. If a person passed away, that's an indication again that it might be misas kodes. And why didn't the Braisa write so explicitly? The Braisa wrote 50. Why didn't you write clearly from 50 to 60? Mishum kavoide shel Shmuel haramasi. Because people might misunderstand it. But now we know, it's really from 50 to 60. But don't think that Shmuel haramasi passed away in any way, shape, or form connected because there was Kaddish there. There was no Kaddish involved there at all. Rav Yosef, Kihava Bar Shitim, when he turned 60, again following the gears of the Rabbeinu Hananel, it's beautiful. Avid Luhu Yom Tov Rabbanon. He made a Yom Tiv. What was his Yom Tiv? Amar, he says, Nafkali Mikaris. You see, I lived until 60. It's a charaya that I'm not shaykh to Kaddish. Amalei Abaya, why are you celebrating? The Hidden Afakli Mar, because the Shni. Yeah, which has the year, the age is an indication of Kaddish or not. But we began this Braisa learning about Meis Pisoi, Misa Chatufa, Misa Duchufa, Misa Magefa. In other words, maybe because the Yomim Minafek Mar, maybe you'll have a very abrupt passing, and that will also be perhaps an indication of some sort of Kaddish. So Amalei, so Rav Yosef responded, I know, you're right, but at least some Kaddish, which is Kaddish connected to the age, that I left. You know what? That's worthy of celebration. Something that's at least partially great. Rafuna noch nafshei pisoim. So Rafuna, that we just learned a few days ago about Rafuna and about the burial of Rafuna, he passed away abruptly. And ha'ava kodaigi rabbanan. Right? If the only way to interpret passing away quick is it's some sort of indication of Kaddish, so they got worried. So Tanaluhu Zuga, the Mehadayev, so a group of scholars from the place of Madayev, repeated a shtickle Braisa. No, Loishanu. When did we learn that passing away abruptly might be an indication of Kaddish the Yoimei Elo Shalegia Legvuris? That's only for someone who never reached the age 80. Once you hit the age 80, passing away abruptly is the greatest thing in the world. Zui misas neshika adarabba. And indeed, Rafuna was a tzaddik on the level that he merited to have misas neshika. Amar Rava, says Rava, that chaye, by the way, we have, this is our seder in our nusach. Because what we normally are familiar with is Bane Chaye Mezoina, on that order. Here the order is Chaye Bane Umezoina. Chaye doesn't only mean life, it means the length of your life. So after we learned about the length of life, says Rava that the length of one's life, Banei, the amount of children that we have, Umazoina, the amount of income that we have, Loi b'schus talia milsa. It's not about our merits. Ela b'mazola talia milsa. It has to do with mazel. And Kiyadua, Toisvis right over here says, hold on, the end of Shabbos, Kufnun Vav, Ein mazel Yisrael. Ein mazel Yisrael, with the whole sugya. So we can lift ourselves above mazel. And a chanami. That's something uniquely for the Jewish people. But there is a certain influence that sometimes mazel can have, and there's a certain mazel involved, not schus. That's again just putting it clearly, that not everyone that passed away young is because of kadis. It's not because they had schusim. It's a two-way street. If the schus brings about a long life, so then sin will shorten the life. If it's about mazel, some of it is beyond us. And the proof is, Tahar Rabba en Abchizda. Tarvayu Rabbanon Tzadika Hava. How do I know that they were tzaddikim? You know, of what level? They were such great tzaddikim. We're jumping back a little bit to Tainus, that when there was a lack of rain, each one of these had the power to pray and to immediately bring about rain. Tzaddik meaning that their connection between Ruchnius and Gashmius was perfect. So if there was a lack of, they davened and rain came. Mar matzliva asa mitra, umar matzliva atra mitra. They both had the ultimate power of prayer that manifested immediately. You know, the Rebbe explains, Ad Meheda Yarodz Devarai, why is it that sometimes when we pray, the prayers take a longer time to materialize, and by unique tzaddikim it happens immediately? The Rebbe gives a very practical way of wording it. That delay in our reality has to do with distance. It means if I want for something to happen, something is being sent to me. If the over there to over here is very far away, it's going to take more time for it to reach. So people who, so to say, are distant from the heavens, even after they pray, and God is giving them what they want, but it's distant. By the time it comes here, a long time goes by. The tzaddikim that davened then immediately got a response. That's because for them they were very close, so to say. So they were both on that level. Yet, Rab Chizda lived Tishin v'Tartin Shnin. Wow, he lived 92 years. Rabba lived 40 years. Clearly, so and it has nothing to do with schus or the lack of schus. This is a mazel. And by the way, okay, right. When Rab Chizda, during his 92 years, he witnessed from his mishpacha, from his family, shitin hilula. He participated in 60 weddings. Obviously, not only from the children, from the grandchildren, from the great-grandchildren. Rabba, during his short life, Shitin Tichle, participated in 60 moments of Avelus, Rahman al-Itzlan, amongst his family. So first of all, you see over here, and it's not about schus. Beit Rab Chizda, they were so wealthy. Smida, the girsas likalavim, v'loy mizbay, they would serve even to their dogs very expensive flour, and they never had a hard time getting it. The household of Rabba, they couldn't even afford the normal flour. They only can afford the barley flour. And even the barley that's being served for the people, Nahama Desari Le'inchi, when they wanted to make bread out of barley to serve to people, which is not ideal, they couldn't find the money for that. And they were both equally tzaddikim. All of that is a proof that a lot of these, especially when it comes to our Seder, to Chaya, and to Bana, and to Mezoina, it's mazel. Don't always interpret it to mean, schus, or the lack thereof. For Amar Rav, I want you to know, Hani, Tlas, Milei, Bo'oi, Kamishmai, I davened for following three things. And Tarti Yahavole, two of them were granted to me, but Chadalo Yahavole, one was not granted to me. Number one, I davened to God for Chochma Seder Afuna. I wanted to have the Chochma Barafuna. I davened, says Rava, to God, Ve'oisrei, the wealth of Rab Chizda. And these two prayers were God responded to them positively, b'toiv hanira v'hanigla, v'yahavoli. But when I davened for an v'sanusei, for the humility, the Rabba barafuna, that was something that was not given to me. As we have this famous statement that hakoil b'dei shamayim, chutz me'yira shamayim. Okay. And why are we writing it over here? It's amazing. We just said that wealth, right? That mezoina is b'mazel. Here we see clearly from the Gemara that your prayer can affect your mazel. So there are exceptions to that. Again, going back to the Tosfos, Taka ein mazel li Yisrael. If we make an effort through davening, through mitzvahs. But there is a certain mazel element. Many people respond that for the collective Jewish people ain't mazel, but for the individual. But there are certain, the bigger parts of life, can chaya, boina, bana, and mezoina. On one hand, it's an indication of a lack of a schus, or on the other hand, kihem chayenu v'oirech yemenu, that for certain mitzvahs it's an indication of a schus. And sometimes it's beyond our activity. It's not isarusa de lasata, it's a pure isarusa de la'ela. Says the Gemara, Amar Lei. Now here, I'm sorry. That Rav So'odim. Yeah, what a fascinating Gemara. Whether So'odim is with a sin or with a samach. Who was Rav So'odim? He was the brother of Rava. Hava Yosef Kamei the Rava. He was sitting in front of Rava. Chazye da Hava Kamenamnim. And he saw that Rava, dozing off means he saw Rava was about to pass away. He was there with Rava while the Rava was passing. So Amalei, so Rava asked his brother Rav So'odim, Leima Leimar, Deloy Litzarim, please tell the angel of death that he shouldn't make it painful. So Amalei, so Rav So'odim tells his brother, hold on, Mar Laf Shushvine, who are you not his friend? And actually we're going to learn soon a story that Rava knew how to interact with the Malach HaMavos. So why don't you ask of the Malach HaMavos that he shouldn't make it painful? So he responded, Rava responded that Kivan the Imasar Maslam, Lo Yashkach Bey. It's once I was given over to the hands of the Malach HaMavos, right now, he's not going to listen to me, but he'll listen to you. And Rav So'odim appealed to the Malach HaMavos that when you're taking my brother, it should not be painful. And not only that, after he davened for his brother, when the Rava was still alive, Amalei, Rav So'odim told the Rava, you know what, can you please come back to me after your passing to let me know whether my prayer worked? Please appear to me. Let me know how I did. And you know what? That's exactly what happened. Rava passed away. And after his passing, Rava appeared, whether it's B'choloim or however you understand it, he appeared to his brother. And Amalei Havalemar Tzara, was it painful? So Amalei, he responded, Ki rivda dechu silta. It was like the puncture that a bloodletter makes with his lancet, which means there was a little bit of pain. It wasn't completely painless, but there was a little bit of pain. If you remember, I think it's Daf Ches, in the beginning of Brachas, when we had that discussion of how many types of deaths, and the Gemara speaks about the most painful one, which we'll get to in a moment, and the least painful one. So on that scale, it was almost painless. Now we have the story from where we see that Rava also knew how to engage with the Malach HaMavos if he wasn't the subject. Rava Havaka Yosef Kamei Rav Nachman, and when Rava was sitting in front of Rav Nachman, Chazya, he saw the common name. It's an amazing expression, that Rav Nachman was dozing off, which means that Rav Nachman was about to pass away. And here again, Amar Lei, Rav Nachman asked Rava, Leimar Lon Mar, please ask the angel of death, the Loilet Saran, they should not make it painful. Amalei, so Rava was shocked. I should ask him. He says, Mar lav adam chashavu. Du bist a chashav mensch. Why didn't you ask the Malach HaMavos? So Amalei, to which he responded, Vehu's chashav. No, I'm dying now. Man sefin. Who is considered awesome? Man rikia. Who's considered exalted? No, now that I'm passing away, I have no power over the angel of death. You daven for me. And the same exchange, Rava agreed. And Rava now wanted to know from his great colleague Rav Nachman whether he succeeded. And Amalei, so Rava asked of Rav Nachman that after your passing, L'schazeli please come back to me. Tell me how was your experience. And it's chazeli. And Amalei, Rava asked Rav Nachman after he passed away, Havalei lamar tzara, was it painful? And here, mamish nothing. Amalei, it was kemishchal bin nisa mechalba. That's what we have in brachas. It's like when you remove a hair that's floating in a cup of milk, and you remove the hair, so the hair adheres to the milk up a drop. So you have to give a little bit of an effort to pull it out. But the removing of the nefesh of the goof was mamish painless. Now, when it comes to the pain of the separation of the nefesh, Ruach HaNeshama from the goof, really many word it like this, that it's the same removal for everyone. But people that became too connected to Gashmias, so that removal of Gashmias is more painful. People, even while they were here, of course, we are connected to Gashmias because the only place where we can do mitzvahs is in this world. It's like a chaval to leave here. But it's all about the service of God. No, it's the end is not the Gashmi. It's how Gashmi is used to serve God. So if the connection is not that tight, so then the removal of it is not that painful. So first of all, Rav Nachman did not have a painful death. It was painless. It was the least painful. However, he added, but if God is going to tell me, Zilbahu Elma, Kadhavis, go back as you were. In other words, come back to life, which would mean that he's going to have another life, which would also another passing. I will still not want it. In other words, if a person had a painful death, it makes sense for them not to want to come back. They don't want to undergo that pain. So Rav Nachman says, even though it was painless, I would not want to do it again. You know why? Because the nafish bi asuse, because the shrek, the fear, the pachad that I had by encountering the Malach HaMavis when I was the subject was so great, that made it an experience that I never want to have to go through that again. Says the Gemara, other Amoyroim, Rabbi Lazar, whether it's the Tana or the Amoyra, right here with the Kohen, Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua, have a ka'achal truma, he was eating truma, and while he's eating truma, is chazulei, the Malach HaMavis comes to take him. So Rabbi Lazar tells the Malach HaMavis, how dare you take me right now? Truma ka. I'm eating truma. V'lav kodesh shikne. Doesn't the Torah call truma kodesh? Kachim. If you're gonna take me right now, then I'm going to be metameit. And by the way, just going back to what we said above regarding tzaddikim don't give off tuma. Tzaddikim don't give off tuma if they have a misas neshikin. Misas neshikin by default means that God does not send the Malach HaMavis to take them. Whenever the Malach HaMavis is involved, there's some sort of tuma, or whether he used that as a teretz. And you know what? He succeeded. That moment passed. Now, what does that mean? Do we say that if the moment passed, you live forever? I don't know what it means, but he got the Malach HaMavis who did not take him at that moment. Rab Sheshes is Chazilei B'Shuka. Rab Sheshes is in the market. Who comes along the Malach HaMavis to take Rab Sheshes? So Rab Sheshes tells the Malach HaMavis, what, are you kidding me? In the marketplace, like an animal. Isa L'Gabe Beis. He tells the Malach HaMavis, let me come home. And it worked. Rav Ashi had it even better. Rav Ashi is Chazilei B'Shuka. He also was in the marketplace. And he sees the Malach HaMavis. So he tells the Malach HaMavis, Amarlei, Israch li tulasin yoimin. Why didn't you move in and be a guest at my house for 30 days? You know, give me another 30 days. You can hang out near me. You know why? Because ahadri lital mudai. I want to chazar, I want to review all of my Torah. The Amritu, because it said, Ashrei Misha Balakan v'Talmudei biyadai. So I need another 30 days. The Hasidim Taich, Ashrei Misha Balakan, not v'Talmudei beroishoi, not even Talmudei beliboi, v'Talmudei biyadai. You got to practice everything that you learned. Limit maybe l'idei mais. So whatever it wanted, Rav Ashi wanted to perfect that level. And you know what? The Malach HaMavis listened to him, which is mamish amazing. Because even though we just learned above, right, all of these statements that kiven the imaser, mazolo lo yashgach bi, or other man chashiv, man sfin, man rakia, here the Rav Ashi had an influence. But okay, 30 days. Now, when does the 30 days end? B'yoyim tulasin, on the 30th day, the Malach HaMavis came, but he came up in the a.m. He came in the morning. So Amalei, so Rav Ashi tells him, what are you rushing? 30 days is 30 days. Come in the afternoon. Come at the Shkia. Shkia de Rabbeinu Tam. Mai kulahai. So he tells him, Kodocha kor ragli de Bar Nosan. Bar Nosan was supposed to be the next Rosh Hashiva. And we have a rule that the Ein Malchus Noi Ga'as Bechaverta Afilukim Eloi Nima. In other words, you can't have two leaders at the same time. Dabar echad ladoir v'lo shnei dabarim ladoir. Rashi brings in Chumash and other such expressions. So you delayed it 30 days, there's no more time. But he delayed it for 30 days. Rab Chizda lo yehava yachalei. The Malach HaMavis was unable to take the soul of Rab Chizda. You know why? Because he never stopped learning. And this isn't only quantitative learning. This is qualitative learning. Right, where do we have the Shabbos Daf Lamed by David HaMelech? The same expression that the Malach HaMavos was unable to take him. We have it, the Alter Rebbe quotes basically from the beginning of Tanya Pedek Aleph, from Bava Metzia, Peivav, Rabba Bar Nachmeni. Do you remember that lo yahava shasik puma megir saying? And the Malach HaMavos did similar tricks. He made noise, and they thought, saying this is the third time that the Malach HaMavos was unable to take it up. They was sitting and learning. So what happened? We have another, by the way. Where did we have the Danny? We had this in Ksubas and Daf Ayin Zayin with Rabbi Shua ben Levi. That was a different story. That he came to take Rabbi Shua ben Levi. He told him, "Let me first see my place in the world to come before you take me." And they gave it to him. Then he tells me, "Give me your sword. You're scaring me with your sword." Then when Rabbi Shua ben Levi came to the wall, he jumped over the wall with the cherev of the Malach HaMavos. And God needed to ask of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi to give it back to the Malach HaMavos. But here, this concept that the Malach HaMavos cannot take a Yid when he's very engaged in learning, 3 times at least. David, Rabbi Bar Nachmeni, and here you have Rab Chizda. So what did he do? Salik, he went up. The Malach HaMavos went up. And Yosef, and he sat Ba'arza the Beirav, in the Beis Medrash outside, there was cedar trees. And he sat, and he made noise there. Pka Arza, he made one of these cedar trees, they broke, and ushtak, and for that moment, there was a big tumult. So Rab Chizda was unable to properly concentrate in his learning. I'm saying that the Leishasak Pume Megir say, I think we learned this in Moed Katan. We learned this in Moed Katan. Remember that you have to wait the time that it takes to work for Amos after learning before urinating. I think it was in Moed Katan. And why is that? Because even after you stop learning, if you're learning the whole time, your mouth will keep on saying the words of Torah. So even here, in other words, the mouth keeps on moving. But it's not like Shasik Puma Megir say on an external level. It's a qualitative learning. That type of concentration he lost because of the noise and the Yachalei. And the Malach HaMavos therefore took Rab Chizda. Now Rab Chia lehave matzei lemikrevolei. Interesting lashon. The Malach HaMavos couldn't even get near to him. So Yoim Achad, and this went for a long time. Maybe he did all the shtick, he made noise, and it didn't work. Rab Chia never got distracted. And he asked to take Rab Chia. So one day, Damale Ka'anya, he appeared in the form of a pauper, and have a Tanef above it, and he knocked on the door. And Amalei Apikli Nift, and he asked for the Bnei Bayis, I need to eat. So of course, the household of Rab Chia, Apikule, they gave him bread. So Amalei, so he says, V'laf kamarachem mara anya. Indeed, this is a house that has Rachmanas on a pauper. So Ahu Gavra, Amaylu kamarachem mar. Wow, he began to plead through the Bnei Bayis, they should get back to Rab Chia. Like Rashi says, Amaylu merachem, the Mesaf Kedna. I was commanded by God, says the Malach HaMavos, Lemeisei Le Lamar Ba'u Alma. I was commanded to bring Rab Chia to the next world, and he doesn't let me do my job. So now he's pleading, and Galilei, and he revealed himself. The Ani revealed himself, and everyone should know that he's taken not just the Ani, but he's the Malach HaMavos. How? Achvelei shoyte denara. He took out some sort of fiery rod, which is something unique. Maybe that's the sword that we just quoted from Ksubas Ayin Zayin. So they saw he's the Malach HaMavos, and he was asking mercy. What's the Rachmanis? Allow me to take you. Oh, and then Amsilei Nafshe, Rab Chia surrendered his life as an act of mercy to allow the Malach HaMavos to do the job of the Malach HaMavos. To be continued.